Who would want to be the Italian coach? Yeah, that's a big question now. The previous Italian coach decided to sack himself after a particularly poor performance against Norway. We would have seen that coming if you were listening to OTC when Lars Sivertsen was on, because he rubbed his hands with glee when he recommended a game of the week. Rubbed his hand with glee.
Like Lady Macbeth, wasn't he?
Smacked his chops and thought, yeah. So we knew there was potentially an upset there. But having said that, it's been a long time coming since Italy won the Euros under Robert Mancini. What's happened?
Yeah, and I think when you said it was a long time coming, I thought you were going to say what happened to Luciano Spalletti, and yeah, I would have agreed as well, because Spalletti has been sitting on the cusp of the volcano for the best part of a year now. I think if you go back to the Euros of last year, the way they just about got through the group, and then they were absolutely humiliated by Switzerland. By the way, in the way that they go out. Some people calling for Spalletti to leave then. And obviously some people saying now, well, should Spalletti have left then, or should he have been invited to leave then? I think that would have been a massive risk. And I don't know if it would have left Italy in a worse position than they are now, but certainly a comparable position to what they are now. But I think before we get stuck into Spalletti too much, I think you have to bear in mind the sort of situation he inherited, because he's bombed in when Roberto Mancini leaves quite suddenly. Mm-hmm. He's left Napoli in not the most comfortable circumstances himself. So, whether he's mentally ready for it, I think has to be a question. Certainly coaching Italy at that point was not part of his grand plan. He kind of defaulted to it, a bit like Antonio Conte back in the day. But I guess Spalletti's parachuted in, and straight away there are games that he has to win to make sure that they're going to get to the Euros, because he's picked up a difficult situation. So where is the room really for Spalletti to breathe? We talked throughout the show about the packed calendar, having time to consider things, having time to work with the players. Spalletti has had none of that. Now, I think on the other hand, you can say that his relations with some of the players and the way that he's dealt with some of the players has been quite poor. I don't think you can deny that. But I do have some sympathy for him, because this constant atmosphere of crisis is not conducive to doing your best work, especially when you only see the players peripatetically.
I think that is such a key thing. We again, like one of the main jobs obviously covering England, and we were talking to Tuchel about exactly this the other day. And I mean, if you look at Spalletti as well, his specific style of football, that takes drilling, that takes integration. Yes. It takes a deeper understanding so things become second nature.
It took years at Roma and Zenit. And,
Whereas Tuchel was talking to us where he's taken the England job since this year. And we're in June now. And in that time, he's had 8 full training sessions. And as he put it, that's the beginning of a pre-season in club game. So, and it does speak to actually, the issue isn't necessarily Spalletti as a coach, but whether actually Italy should have gone for someone because maybe that you don't get that sort of manager at international level. And that's before we think we get into all the bigger issues or with I think the Italian national team.
I suppose that's always the question, isn't it, with an international team? Are you taking Capello or Southgate? And should you be taking Capello or Southgate? That's the question, isn't it? The non-glamour appointment is often the better one. Now,
just as a tangent on that, I think there's a really interesting thing developing. Given what we were saying earlier about the Club World Cup, and all the clubs want the market of America, so do the national federations. So if you actually notice, we're in a trend at the moment where, because all of the national federations see money and see box office, they want big names as their managers. England have gone for Tuchel.
Nagelsmann.
Pochettino.
Yeah.
Already now there are murmurs, despite this Nations League win, that Mourinho is being set up to come in as at Portugal.
Yeah.
And of course, who are the reigning European champions? Well, it's Spain with De La Fuente, who a lot of people probably still don't know who he is.
Yeah.
But is that? I wonder if it's about the national teams wanting
Brazil Ancelotti, another one actually.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's about the national teams wanting big name coaches, or the other way around. That big name coaches suddenly realise
it's both. It's both.
Yeah,
It's a bit of both, yeah.
because they don't mind having that national team coaching job on their CV.
Yeah, and I think as well, coaching is such an all-consuming job. I think especially if you've come from the club game, you need a feeling that you're really being absorbed with it. And I think, it's the adjustment that Tuchel's talking about is perhaps the adjustment for Spalletti when he came in. It's definitely been the adjustment for Nagelsmann, because you get the impression they sack Hansi Flick because they're basically forced to. Not because he's not a good coach, but because it's not working at all between him and Germany. And Germany never sack coaches, certainly not abruptly in that sort of way. And so, they lose that game 4-1 at home to Japan in Wolfsburg. He's gone the next morning. All the players are still in the hotel in Wolfsburg and Flick's off. Whereas I think with Spalletti, it's the same thing. He's looking for that time to work with the players. Now, Nagelsmann, in terms of us widening up this conversation and talking about how they really need a chance to get into it, he comes in and after Flick goes and is right, okay, I'm going to see us through to the Euros. And they get him in because they don't want to be shown up in a home tournament in Euro 2024. And then it goes quite well. And Nagelsmann's, I've got a bit of an empty stomach. It's like you get invited to a nice restaurant and you have a starter and half a glass of champagne. It's like, well, I'm not leaving now, am I? I've kind of got to see it through to the World Cup. Now, that's different as well because he's got time on his side. He's still in his 30s, all that sort of stuff. But I think it's in a head coach's nature that when you have a little nibble of something, you're not going to leave the table while you're still hungry, are you?
I like the Germany-Italy comparison, though, Miguel, because these are multi-World Cup winners. Italy's won the World Cup 4 times.
Yeah, and they're both in a position where they've unbelievably underachieved in recent years.
What's interesting? I'd say both countries, in terms of the quality of player, are both under their historic levels, you would say, even through series of teams they've produced throughout the years. Germany,
I don't think that's unfair, but they've got better squads than people would like to admit.
Absolutely, I was about to say that. Germany only a little less. Italy, I mean, look, my friend James Horncastle was talking about this. The obvious got to go to with Italy. They don't have Baggios, they don't have Del Pieros, and that is a massive drop off. But they've still got a high quality international team. Like we shouldn't overlook that.
Yeah.
And I think that's reflected in most Euro performances over the last decade.
They're international Manchester United at the moment.
Yeah.
But the problems overshadow the quality that's still there.
I do wonder on this. And it's interesting Dotun mentioned the 4 World Cups because traditionally through Italy's history, actually, they had a great World Cup record, even if there used to be this kind of cliche about they'd start slowly or whatever, or it was one World Cup on, one off. But they had a great World Cup record and a very middling Euros record, even going out in the group stage in 96, not qualifying for 92. Whereas now that's
2004.
Flipped. Yeah. Now that's completely flipped. They've got a strong Euros record, having won it in 5 years ago or 4 years ago. And I wonder, is something... It's a bit like suddenly this talk is resurfaced lately about the weight of the England shirt. And I wonder what Italy players, when they play given they've gone 2 without qualification now, have they kind of, is there some sort of like psychological intensity and pressure that's come on now once they enter World Cup qualifying? They have to make it happen.
Yeah, and obviously the longer it doesn't happen for the more the weight becomes. I mean, we have this discussion in the club game. You need a set of players who can cut all the psychological baggage of the past away. If you're a player playing for a team now, should you care that you haven't won away at your great rivals in 10 years? Well, you shouldn't. But obviously there's a feeling around the club that you can't be completely separate from. And I guess it's the same at international level to a certain degree, isn't it? But look, I think that feeling that Italy must have at the moment, that we could be the set of players who could miss the World Cup finals for a 3rd successive time. Yeah. I mean, that's just a disgrace for Italy. And, the history that they've got in the European and world game, that would be absolutely terrible. But I think you have to ask as well, are these current players, it's not just about the production of players, it's about it's always about who your experienced players are, or it's almost always about who your experienced players are. And at the moment, if we're talking about the weight of the shirt, how many real leaders are there in there? I think that's the question. For me, you can pick talent out of every line. I think if you look at Donnarumma and the great season that he's had, Buongiorno, who's had a great season with Napoli, obviously he's not fit at the moment and hasn't been there. You look at Bastoni, you look at Sandro Tonali, one of the very best midfield players in the Premier League, Matteo Retegui, who, however he's ended up playing for Italy, is one of the best strikers in Europe, or certainly was on the evidence of last season. But I guess when you look at Italy, where is your... not just Baresi, where's your Chiellini? Where's your Bonucci? Verratti, of course, has faded from the European game. All those sort of things count. And they're the players that, if you're the coach, obviously you have very little time with those players, even more than in the club game. There needs to be one or two who you lean on to be your representatives on the pitch. Just like Xabi Alonso always talked about Granit Xhaka being like the closest I have to me on the pitch. Of course, they're very different characters. And as Simon Rolfes said, he says the nasty stuff that everyone else is too nice to say. And I think you need that. You know, that leans into what we were talking about with Chiellini and Bonucci. That sense that they can turn up and just turn it on at a big tournament. Obviously, you have to get to the big tournament first. But at the moments where it really matters, those are the players, I think, that seem to be missing for Italy at the moment while they're sort of in this development phase.
I know you're going to say I take every opportunity to quote or misquote Shakespeare, but having thought about the number of Shakespearean plays that were set in Italy and the fact that the famous quote is "heavy is the head that wears the crown," you could argue that heavy is the back, the shoulder that carries the shirt, and arguably that weight is on the coach that follows Spalletti, given where they need to get to qualify for a World Cup and so on.
And obviously, when we talked about crises, it was clear that they were going to talk to Claudio Ranieri at some point.
Yeah.
And it's clear
and
that
said,
despite what Arrigo Sacchi said, that when Italy call, it is your duty to answer. Is it your duty if you're 73 and you've just pulled Roma through the season that he's pulled Roma through?
There might be other reasons that he doesn't want that poison chalice.
Well, look, I'm sure he's getting plenty of stick at home as well. But no, I agree. Maybe he looks at it and thinks, I'm set for failure here. I think there is that argument. Certainly, Roberto Mancini felt that. He felt it had got to that point. And, you know, it is an underlying theme of Mancini's coaching career that where he thinks, I've either not got the backing or I've not got the conditions to succeed, he could not be out of a job quick enough. Mm-hmm. He doesn't ask for compensation or anything like that. He just goes, you know, like Gabriel Byrne steaming out of a burning building. That's him. So I guess Ranieri will have seen that, and it's clear he will have thought that. But also this idea that he's the guy who saves the impossible situation, whether that be Leicester or what he's done at Roma this season, arguably is equal to that in the context, and especially the context between the fans and the club that we've talked about so extensively on OTC this season. At the end of that, why would he want to go and do it all again? Especially when he was looking forward to his retirement last summer.
I think given this is possibly an intensity like no other, because it's probably, even speaking from where we are in London, there's probably no inquest like an Italian national team failure.
But the question to me is, what happens when this falls to Rino Gattuso, who we know is combustible as well. I mean, he's
the favourite to replace Spalletti at the moment.
Yeah, I guess because there just aren't that many candidates. Now, he's just come out of a season at Hajduk Split, which, let's say, didn't end quite as he wanted, which was full of a few Gattuso-esque eruptions with various people, is fair to say as well. I mean, I've always kind of admired Gattuso. If you look at his managerial career as a whole, he's never gone for the easy option. He's seen the burning building and he's stepped into it. But is this a step too far?
Rome wasn't burned in a day, is all I would say.